a stormy winter, staying here tonight.
Howdy, Shindiggers. My name is Steve Holroyd. By my side, as always, is Sammy the Wonder Pug. And you are listening to The Front Row, hosted by the Philly Soccer Page. Last couple times out, we've talked about lost leagues. And I want to revisit another lost league in this episode, except this one is a little different in that it's one of those leagues that may be lost to you, but I was actually around to live through. And as a result, it may give, I may be able to impart some unique perspectives as opposed to simply culling things from newspaper articles. And that league I'm talking about is the United Soccer League, not the one that's currently around today, as our Division III in the pyramid setup, currently applying for Division II, but rather the United Soccer League that first arrived in 1984 and lasted for 2 seasons, 1984 and 1985. And it makes for an interesting subject because the USL was basically U.S. soccer's last clear chance of not dying in the 80s, and it presents an interesting example of what if. So it might be worth talking about today. Let's go back to 1984. Now that was the North American Soccer League's last season. But the league itself didn't necessarily know that in 1984. But the writing was on the wall for the NASL for some time at that point. Rampant overspending, few opportunities for native-born Americans to play, and little contact with the local community contributed significantly to its downfall from its peak of 1977. And as I said, the writing was on the wall. You could tell the NASL was struggling. However, many people still believed in the sport of soccer and thought that all that was needed was to return the sport to its grassroots, essentially shooting for the NASL of the 1973-1974 era, when its growth really began, and when that growth was really driven by fans and grassroots support. The Philadelphia Atoms of 1973, the Great Western expansion that included all the Cascadian teams in 1974 and 1975, basically shooting for that era. The era before Pele arrived and had driven salaries through the roof. In fact, that might be the subject of a podcast one day, how Pele basically killed American soccer. So anyway, there were a group of people that wanted to, again, reconnect with this grassroots approach when local communities felt a genuine connection with teams like the Philadelphia Atoms, San Jose Earthquakes, Minnesota Kicks, Seattle Sounders, and whatnot. And with this goal in mind, the United Soccer League was born in February of 1984. At first blush, it appeared that the USL was simply a continuation of the American Soccer League, which had folded at the conclusion of its 50th season in 1983. And indeed, former ASL sides Dallas Americans and Jacksonville T-Men could be counted among the USL's teams, along with the Oklahoma City Stampede, a direct descendant of the ASL's Oklahoma City Slickers. Similarly, the Rochester Flash also joined the USL, and that was a former ASL team that had taken the 1983 season off. However, the USL was intended to be much more than a mere continuation of the ASL. Adopting a strict 5-point policy, the league hoped to save the sport of soccer in America by focusing on the very issues NASL teams had ignored. And those would be 1, fiscal responsibility, 2, regionalization, 3, orderly expansion, 4, Americanization, and 5, a strong, lean office. A key facet of the USL was that the league planned on operating as a year-round entity with its franchises fielding indoor clubs in addition to the outdoor squads. And again, that was a big thing back in the 80s. Indoor soccer was pretty big, and a lot of Americans thought that would be the way for American fans to embrace the game before moving on to the purer version of outdoor soccer. So that idea in and of itself was not crazy. The NASL had been doing it for a number of years. It's what was expected. And we have this quote, "The impact of a club playing both seasons with basically the same roster will have an effect on the general operation of a franchise, said Dr. William R. Burfind, the USL's commissioner. Again, returning to the quote, rivalries, player identification, fan interest, etc., will all be perpetuated by our operating year-round. In addition, the overall costs will be considerably less than starting up another operation, close quote. Americanization was emphasized in the USL, and the league required that 14 out of a team's 18 players be American. Similarly, a strict salary cap of $175,000 was imposed, with the figure to go to $350,000 if the team participated in the indoor season. Exceptions to the cap could be made, but only with approval of a majority of the owners. Now, parenthetically, I'd point out that this cap would be grossly illegal in the absence of a union, and there wasn't one at the time, but no one was paying attention. What can I tell you? All that said, the USL's logic was a breath of fresh air. A number of franchises joined the XASL teams. Joining Dallas, Jacksonville, Rochester, and Oklahoma City were the Buffalo Storm, Charlotte Gold, Fort Lauderdale Sun, Houston Dynamos, and New York Nationals. In fact, excitement over the league was such that two North American Soccer League teams, the Tulsa Roughnecks and the Tampa Bay Rowdies, almost jumped to the new league. Similarly, the number one American-born player at that time, Ricky Davis, was also eager to help out. He was willing to play for the New York Nationals. However, the other league owners, citing fiscal austerity, refused to give New York a salary cap exemption. In no matter, the league received great support from Soccer America and Soccer Digest and appeared to be running on all cylinders. In what was a hopeful omen, the league's offices were located in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, which was an act sure to put a smile on any soccer historian's face. Some once and future stars dotted USL rosters. Buffalo featured former Rochester Lancer Dennis Bentham and two brothers who would go on to make names for themselves in indoor soccer for years to come, Rudy and Randy Pikuzinski. Charlotte was led by player coach Dave Derrico, a longtime national team defender for the U.S., and also included North American Soccer League super sub Pat Fidelia, who had starred with Philadelphia for a couple of years. All-time Peruvian great Teofilo Nene Cabayas suited up for Fort Lauderdale, along with NASL veterans Dave Watson, Jeff Wall, and Keith Weller. Houston acquired the Babe Ruth of the ASL, Jose Neto, and Jacksonville featured another minor league soccer legend, Ringo Cantillo. Although never getting Ricky Davis, New York could still list Michael Collins, Richie Reese, and Jim Guevara on its roster. Given the NASL caliber talent on its roster, it was no surprise that Fort Lauderdale would establish itself as the class of the league. The Sun racked up 122 points under the USL scoring system, which was similar to the NASL system of providing so many points for a win, more than 3, 6 points for a win, 5 points for a win, and bonus points for every goal scored up to a certain amount per game. Oklahoma took the regular season crown thanks to such bonus points, since it shared an identical 15-9 record with Fort Lauderdale. However, the Sun would get their revenge, winning the first USL championship by defeating the Stampede 2-1 in the final. Jose Neto lived up to his billing, scoring 22 goals in 21 games for Houston, and some other names that dotted American soccer for a number of years, both indoor and outdoor, like Thompson, Usian, starred with Oklahoma City, and Randy Phillips with the Dallas team was the second overall goalkeeper in the league with a 1.34 goals against average. Even with these austere financial measures, even with the austere financial measures imposed by the league nevertheless struggled. I mean, the New York franchise, key to any league, struggled financially and gave the league an ill-timed black eye. The USL survived, however, and would return for the next season, 1985, which, of course, was more than its big brother in the North American Soccer League could say. Nevertheless, the USL just barely survived to see its second season. In the second season, the Fort Lauderdale Sun became the South Florida Sun. Dallas Americans returned. And there was a new team, El Paso Juarez Gamecocks, and Tulsa, the city of Tulsa, no longer with a North American Soccer League franchise, entered the Tulsa Tornadoes. The league was planning on playing two halves, the first half of the season being a rather short 6-game set, with the second half of the season to be 12 games. And the league did complete the first half of its season with South Florida Sun, again featuring Nene Caballas and adding Boris Bandolf, former New York Cosmos player, remained the class of the league with 4 wins and 2 losses. But the league was not thriving. The league averaged approximately 2,500 per game, which was similar to what the ASL, the old ASL, was drawing in its last season, but was simply not enough to keep the league going as a fully professional circuit. Right after the end of the first half of the season, and obviously before the planned 12-game second half, creditors, citing major unpaid debts, foreclosed on the league. Without warning, league administration was locked out of their offices, and the league had come to a sudden end. And with that was the end of fully professional soccer in the United States in the summer of 1985. So, like a lot of American soccer leagues that came before it, the United Soccer League was really a circuit filled with great ideas that simply were poorly executed. The timing wasn't right. To the extent there was a soccer market at all, its focus was really on the indoor game, which at that time was doing gangbusters, and in many markets was outdrawing hockey and basketball teams. And as a result, while there were a lot of good ideas, a lot of sound ideas, and indeed a lot of ideas that Major League Soccer would revisit when it arrived on scene 11 years later, the timing simply wasn't right, and the United Soccer League joined the veritable alphabet soup of American leagues that had collapsed since the very first professional league in 1894. So what we may revisit last time is the period after the USL's demise and up until the period when MLS was formed, because with the USL's collapse, there was a true return to grassroots soccer, with clubs, basically, instead of franchises, rising up out of the ashes, forming leagues, and doing what they could to keep some semblance of professional soccer alive. And that's what we'll visit next time. But until next time, this is Steve Holroyd, along with Sammy the Wonder Pug, reminding you that you can subscribe to us on iTunes, and ratings and reviews are always welcome. You can follow us on Twitter at Section 107 Row A, and you can send us emails with questions, comments, whatever, at soccermaven, that's soccer, M-A-V-N, at yahoo.com. So until next time, this is Steve Holroyd and Sammy the Wonder Pug bidding you adieu and good times and good soccer, and reminding you to keep your feet on the ground.
We always knew you'd be
Take care.
the one to drive a fancy car. And now we're happy to see you succeeding everywhere you are. Cause you're keener than Keegan, and you're better than best. We always knew you'd go far. You're a 70s football star.